I tell parents all the time, you're in a race with the world when it comes to sex education, and you do not get to determine the terms of the timeline.
Well, if they find out that you were writing love notes to a boy, you're getting accused, you're getting talked to by the youth pastor or something.
We are afraid of what will happen to our faith, or that it would be a sin to have more information. What you intended for evil.
God, turn it around.
God will use it for good.
All right, everyone. Welcome back to the Prolific Collective podcast. I'm super, super excited about today's conversation. I'm going to say right now that you guys are in for a treat, first of all. Because today's, they're about to know why I said that. But then you guys are also in for a bit of a wild, vulnerable ride. So just prepare for all the things. Dr. Jenna Mountain is an incredible trauma therapist, just an incredible woman, and I think today's conversation needs to happen. It's got to happen, and at some point in your life, it's going to be valuable for you to have conversations like this. So, hey, welcome to the Prolific Collective podcast, Dr. Jenna.
Thank you so much for having me. I've been so excited to get to today, so I'm thrilled.
Yes, and of course, just a little bit of background. I've told them a lot about you already, but can you give just our audience just a little bit of like a high-level overview of who you are, and of course your work, and then I would just, always ask like a fun fact, something that's interesting that is non-clinical about you.
Okay. I'll try to work on that last one. So I am a licensed professional counselor in the great state of Texas. And serve clinically those who are in this state, whether you travel in to see me or you're local, across the state. And then I also do coaching nationally and internationally with leadership development and relationships, so I can do some fun stuff there. I am a certified sex therapist, so I am also a sexuality expert. I spend most of my time working with, because that's actually still a broad specialty, I spend most of my time working with individuals and couples with sexual dysfunction. My dissertation actually looked at history of trauma as it intersects with pelvic floor dysfunction and sexual dysfunction. So I wanted
Which is why we connected, y'all.
Yes,
just let you know.
yes. This is why we vibe. So I exist a lot at the intersection of trauma and sexuality as far as like my work with others. And so I like to tell people that I am a relationship and sexuality informed trauma therapist and a trauma informed relationship and sex expert, because I have a lot of people I love and respect very much that they have one but not the other, and it does make a difference. And so
absolutely,
I'm all about disrupting, which is a little bit my personality. I'm kind of edgy, but disrupting the things that disrupt you is what I tell people. So
absolutely. Yeah. And what's that fun fact? Just tell me something non-clinical about you.
So I would say the fun fact that most people don't know about me is that my husband and I'm married to a wonderful man. I say he's the saint I occasionally like to strangle because I like to keep it real. And he really is.
Oh my gosh, sometimes they're really married.
That's real. Like we gotta keep it real. But the fun fact about us that most people don't know unless you knew us back in college is we actually met and started out as friends working together doing ministry in music and hip hop. And so a lot of people don't know that.
I didn't know the music. What? Hip hop.
Yes. So my husband was a part of a group of guys that did a lot of like remixes of popular songs to do ministry, and they all rapped, and they needed a female vocalist, and I led worship at the time.
Not you have a rap background. Listen, it all makes sense now.
Be very clear.
But you were laying vocals on rap records, Jenna.
And then we went and did that for a couple of years together, and it was so fun. So a lot of people don't know that about me.
I just love that you said, and then we went and did that for a few years.
Yeah,
and then by the way, now I'm into sex therapy and your life, love it. Can't wait for the biography. It's gonna be hilarious because if you're starting off at rap music
and ending up in sex, I mean, you never know
what. But whatever gets the saints there. All right,
That's right.
Well, Well, as you guys can tell already, of course, Jenna is definitely very much the vibe of all things prolific here. And, I think what I just wanted to just say kind of really is I just love how we all have these pasts and these backstories of us that don't always feel like they fit into the script, but help us also to really connect well with patients and clients as we come along. So, of course, and then now you're doing this incredible work. And by the way, anyone who takes the leap of faith to do a dissertation and go the PhD route. What?
Listen, talk about trauma. I mean, I need to do some of my own trauma work.
Gotta do some LMDR, or EMDR, because baby, just a little bit,
It was. I tell people a lot. So I almost didn't finish. I always want to be like really honest and transparent about that story. There were a couple times I almost quit, like out of choice, and then I got to the very end where like my opportunity almost expired, and really had to push hard and through. And so the reason I started is not the reason I finished. It was over the course of 10 years. It was a labor of love, and I can say I'm glad I finished now, and I am glad I did the study I did, but it was definitely a huge learning experience.
And how often in life does that happen, right? You go in one way, and sometimes what keeps you there is different than what got you started, and then what gives you the drive to complete, right, is completely different than even what maintained you and sustained you. And so it's just so beautiful that you let the story be what it was and you saw it through, because now we have you fully licensed, thoroughly doctored, and
I know
tons of info. And so let's wild thing. Let's talk a little bit though, because part of, as I was praying and really thinking through what the Lord is just saying, and to especially a lot of women right now in this season, is just, I think I'm noticing this, I don't know if you've seen it, but I think that most people are starting to come into awareness of identity. And when you come into awareness of identity, guess what else shows up? Stuff that you haven't resolved. Hello.
Yeah. The things you haven't been paying attention to or aware of. Yeah.
And what are some things you think we haven't been paying attention to?
Well, if we're going to talk specifically about women, and I'll follow kind of your comment there. I do work with a lot of women. They come into the office for a wide variety of reasons. So the issue or the experience or the pain point that brings them in can widely vary. And across most of the women that I have worked with over the last at least 5 years, but probably over the course of a decade, they actually have some commonalities. And then some of that has to do with some of the systemic things that we see in our culture when it comes to women that is unique to them. And then some of those things I think can be shared with our male counterparts. But I do think that most of them are kind of waking up, if you will, to realizing, specifically with women, that they do not know themselves. Ooh. They do not know who they are. And that is a very layered comment. It's not just, it has to do with context. It has to do with their individuality. It has to do with, who am I in my community? Who am I in my family? Who am I? What's really interesting is women will come in, and I'm just getting to know them, because that's a part of therapy, is we kind of warm up that relationship. Yeah. And I'll ask them things, and some of it is I'm asking these things because I want to know how they take care of themselves and what their preferences are, because our self-care and our coping is very unique to just us and what works for me in the season of life. And I'll start asking questions like, what do you like, and what do you tend to reach for, and what are your choices on this, different parts of their lives. And what's really interesting, they don't realize it until I start pushing back. A lot of times they actually do not know how to answer those questions.
Oh boy. Well, okay.
Right? And
we don't even know how to cope. Yeah.
And it's like, so what do you like to do? And they'll answer the question referencing someone else in their life. Well, my kids like this, and so we go do this. And I'm like, what do you like to do?
What do you like to do?
And I'll say, okay, or we'll be talking about sex. And I'll say, okay, well, what are the things that you like? Well, my husband likes this, or my spouse likes this. And I'll go, but what do you like? And they've been so trained to be other oriented in society, in lots of different cultures, but culture at large, if I can say that they don't know how to orient to the self. They don't know how to self-attune and figure out what I like and what works for me. And it's not that we never consider and accommodate others. I'm not saying that. But for many women I work with, there is a gap in what they got developmentally to get to know themselves. And learn to use that voice, try it on, and so I actually, I work with a lot of women in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s and on. So every decade I'm like thinking about, and I ask them to start dating themselves. And to give the attention to the self, to really start to get to know the person as if it is this new person that you're interested in, and you get kind of excited about getting to know them, just like you would when you first started dating. Let the dopamine hits come from that, right? All that fun reward, novelty stuff. But it's you. And if you decide you don't like something, you just get to learn that. Like, you didn't fail, but you have to learn what you don't like, and you have to find out what you do like, and to date the self, if you will. But women don't know themselves.
And I'll say that I think that's such a powerful just perspective to take on, is like, maybe this is just a season to date yourself. Because I think too, in dating, the safety around dating is curiosity, right? It's like you get to be curious about the individual. You get to be, there's not really a lot of attachment there. There's not a lot of buy-in yet. We're just literally allowing the interaction to be what it is. And that's, of course, healthy dating. Not like that's what everyone does, but also that. But I think too, when it takes the pressure off of the journey of self-discovery, when you start there, right? It's like, I don't have to get to a lot of answers right away. I could just be curious about who I am. I could be curious about my likes and dislikes. And I don't know, for me, and maybe like now you're starting to therapy me a little bit, but I like, for me, I feel like, I can say personally, over the years, what had been hard for me, even in going to that journey of self-discovery, is unlearning what I was told to want versus what I really wanted.
Yes.
Right? And
you have to, I think most of the women I work with, one of the conversations that we have at some point is, hey, we have to create some space for you to get to know yourself. And that can be very unique to each person. But one commonality is, part of that is to unlearn and let go of some unhelpful things that are probably taking up too much space in your psyche, your assumptions about yourself as a woman, your assumptions about yourself as a whatever it is, right? Like, I'm from this family, and so in this family, this is what the women do, or this is what we have believed. And so, most of our work in therapy and coaching is going to be unlearning in order to make space. So you are right on the nose there.
Yeah, and I think also, too, it's like one of the things that I think in my work over the years I've gotten curious about, even in working with patients, is recognizing that some of the most self-aware people are the people that get through that healing journey with the less amount of collateral, the less amount of scars. It seems to be the most beautiful portion of it, right? Is like those people who really know who themselves, know their self-awareness. I could think of one patient right now that was probably one of my biggest lessons. Is she early on had just a heavy form of self-awareness. She could tell me what was working, what wasn't working. And she ended up being a huge, having such great success. But I think for me, like, that's been a big thing. And every phase of life, before I had kids, that conversation looked different. After I had kids, that conversation looked way different, and even with another child. So I think also just giving yourself permission to continue to revisit that is like, okay, what do I actually like now? What is it? Yeah.
Because you're not the same person you were 5 years ago. In fact, when I'm working with couples, and one of them either, equal opportunity, Either of them complains, oh, they're not the same person I married. I'm like, that's a good thing.
That's the whole point. That's the whole point.
That's
I hope they wouldn't.
Yeah,
because
if
we gotta
you're
evolve.
the same person you were 10 or 15 years ago, I'm more worried and concerned. So yeah, like you have to get to know each other in each phase. And some of that has to do, if we could put a tight circle around just you as an individual, but it has to do with where your partner or spouse has developed into. It has to do what stage of life you're in, where you're living. I mean, the era that you're living in, right? We talk about like the world around us and what we're all going through collectively. So yeah, you never stop getting to know yourself.
So
ever.
Good. And I kind of want to just like jump right in here because why not? Let's just go into the deep real quick. Is like also, there's this portion too is like, part of I think getting to know yourself and recognizing who you are is also recognizing what was actually traumatic, what was hurtful, right? And putting a name to that. And I'm going to just put this out here because a lot of the audience come from a pretty religious background. Mm-hmm. I could say for sure that it was looked down upon to call something traumatic when it could have been like God's putting you through a process and you're going through a storm and you have to fight through it. And so I think too, for me, was just being able to name it what it was unapologetically versus trying to use biblical theology to explain away my hurt. Because Jesus wept. And I always say that about Jesus. He wept.
Jesus had all the feels. And we miss that a lot of time in Scripture.
We miss that.
Yeah, I think when you and I had lunch together, I might have mentioned this, but I had the honor and joy of teaching at the graduate level at a private university for counseling students. Okay. And I got to teach what they call the integration class. And so the class had actually talked about faith and science. And I don't know if you experience this as much in your professional world as I did, but it is a really spicy topic in the mental health world, in this idea of faith and science. Like, are they enemies? Are they not enemies? Yeah. Especially, again, in the territory of mental health, because it got pretty turfy there. It still is in some circles. And the dynamic that you're referring to is spiritual bypassing, right? So this idea of taking scripture.
We got a word, guys. Write it down.
And like bypassing what needs to be attended to.
Spiritual bypassing.
Yes. Spiritual bypassing. So
I just don't want to bypass that because that's really,
important.
Language is powerful, by the way. Language is so important to healing. You got to know what to call it. And that's spiritual bypassing. Yeah.
Yes. And one of the authors I enjoy referring to, I'll always try to throw tidbits in because I know people want to leave here and like keep learning, right? Yeah. So one of my favorite authors to go and read from that does a really good job of unpacking this. Well, there's two. I'll mention two. One is Pete Scazzaro. He wrote a book that has now turned into a series and a whole body of work and practice, which is Emotionally Healthy Spirituality. And he is a pastor by trade and training, and kind of spiritually bypassed his mental health for a long time. And he tells that story, and then realized that that is a big problem and that they are not enemies. And he even says, he believes, and I subscribe to this, that like you actually can't have healthy spirituality if you're not emotionally healthy as well. Like they are not things that can be separated out. They are not enemies. It's a part of God's plan for you to have emotional intelligence. And so he talks about that a lot. So for the faith-based community, if they want to go read, I think Pete does a really good job of unpacking that. The other author I love is Sharon Hodde Miller. She wrote a book called The Cost of Control.
Oh, God. Okay, that one's going in the cart.
Yes, it's so good. It's so good. And it's an easy read. But she talks about how we use control in all of these ways and actually takes it all the way back to like Genesis 3 and the garden and the fall, and unpacks how our control issues started there. It's like it's really a part of like the original sin and the curse. And she talks about how Christians will try to control with knowledge, try to control with theology, and try to control in all these ways that like, man, it's got all this theological and Jesus glitter on it, but it's really bypassing the real issue. And so faith and science, specifically mental health, are not enemies. In fact, if you understand the function of science, And I always love teaching this. If you understand the function of science, a good scientific research or study can only observe. It's when we get into that conclusion and that meaning making that the scientist, right, the human that's conducting it, starts to put inferences and meaning making on it. That's all theoretical, but good science just observes. And so I always tell people good science is simply observing God's creation, God's design, or sin's brokenness and the way it riddles it all. And that's it, right? And so all the meaning making comes from us humans, which really is about faith and theory. And that's where, we're on this footing that we need to learn how to do that better with each other. But good science is observing a lot of what does not shake God off his throne. So that's always what I tell people.
There you go. And nothing surprises him. Nothing takes him, by surprise. I was thinking about, so this will make you kind of laugh or feel bad for me either way, but confess here, might as well. But I just brought to my spirit as you were talking, and I remember a message that I preached. I was young, I was younger. It was 2017. Had an opportunity to preach to a large audience in our denomination, the denomination I grew up in, and I was asking God to give me like a word about faith, a word about just something very like perfect and digestible for the denomination. But guess what God had me preach about, Jenna?
Oh, I can't wait.
Depression. Why would I?
Sure he did. I love it. I bet you hit it out of the park.
You're so sweet. Well, young Yenny was definitely surrendered and at the feet of Jesus because I was so afraid, because I knew and sometimes, whenever I'm prepping for a word, and I feel like that's now the standard for me, is I just let God shift whatever he wants on me, whatever word, whatever download, whatever. But that was the first time for me. I really surrendered. Whatever you want, I will say. And I remember when I was preparing it, the story that I used was when, Prophet Elijah had actually faced the 400 prophets of Baal. He had faced them dead on. The Lord had done a great work. And the Bible talks about how he goes into the wilderness in the middle of nowhere, and he's freaking out. I want to die. I'm losing my mind. I'm not happy. And the Lord says, go to sleep and get up and eat. And that was the text. And I think they gave me 15 minutes to preach. I was a young preacher, so it's like they don't want to give me too much time so I don't mess it up. And I'm telling you, Jenna, the amount of messages, emails, text flooded, because no one was talking explicitly at that time in our denomination, especially about mental health. People had overly rationalized it. Now, looking back, I believe that the Lord allowed me to experience that because he wanted to validate my personal experiences early on. But I think so many people just need permission to not do that bypassing, right? I love that you use that.
Well, and spiritual bypassing or hyper-rationalizing, two things you just mentioned, keep us out of emotional health. And I always tell people the pursuit of happiness is a terrible goal, in my opinion. I don't think pursuing happiness actually increases happiness. I actually think it decreases it, because when we start to control our emotional experiencing, which is not how that part of our souls and bodies and brains are supposed to work, we actually decrease the opportunity to experience happiness, joy, rest, and where all those positive feelings exist. And so we end up, but by controlling for it or denying processing those negative feelings, which are really important, we actually decrease our ability or likelihood or probability of getting to experience happiness, joy, excitement, celebration, all of those things. So all of those habits that seem so great spiritually actually end up rotting that out. When I talk about trauma in scripture, Genesis 50:20 is probably my favorite scripture for understanding trauma, because Joseph looks at his brothers at the end of his story and he goes, what you intended for evil, God turn it around. God will use it for good. But we don't deny that it was evil. We don't deny that it was painful. We don't deny that it was wrong, right? And so it wasn't spiritual bypassing. In fact, what it is despite you, God is, right?
Yeah.
That's the faith-filled, trauma-informed approach to spirituality and a relationship with the Lord that I would prefer people lean into as believers, because when you deny in order to talk about God, first of all, he doesn't need that. I mean, he's God, right?
Yeah.
But it also doesn't honor the way that we were created to work.
I love that you even just explicitly said that there is a good way of doing this, because what I don't like is I'm hearing a lot of rhetoric now in our society where, and especially I think there's some generational tension around a lot of younger people going to therapy, reclaiming their identity, getting the language to explain things. There's this whole generation of individuals who don't like that their child is calling something gaslighting, or who don't like that they're being called this, right? And so in like, I think one thing that is, I see, there's a thing about it is like, there's one end where you're not taking any personal responsibility and you're going to explain things away with therapy terms. And then there's another thing where you're afraid to use therapy terms because you don't want to exclude people who might not really be ready to accept that, right? But I do think that I'd much rather more people know this than not. You know what I'm saying? Because it's not fair for people to not be able to have a language to explain what they're going through and be able to make decisions from that, you know?
Yeah. It's interesting. I think this is, and again, this might be because I hang out in these buckets a lot, but I think this is actually where sexuality and trauma share a little bit of a story in the church, where we are afraid of what will happen to our faith, or that it would be a sin to have more information. To learn, right? To be educated, to be informed, to be able to name things, to understand how they work. Like, we are really afraid, especially in those two buckets. There's probably more. But I see that happen a lot. Powerful. Like, if I understand trauma, I'm afraid what will happen to my faith. Or if I start engaging in this mental health way, I'm afraid what it'll do to my faith. If I learn about sex and can talk about it and have lots of details and information that's so explicit, I'm afraid what that'll do to my faith. And so we're really afraid of being informed and educated sometimes as believers. And that is not faith, in my opinion. That is, I would say, that's oppressive religious control.
Doctrine.
That's indoctrination. Like, faith should be a fully consensual, personal experience and relationship. And yes, the greater little c church can't control people that are educated. And so I think those pockets that do look more like high control religion and cults and indoctrination and want control, and I even think those people really believe they're trying to protect. Like, they believe the lie that they're protecting.
Absolutely. Yeah.
However, that's not faith. Those people did not come to that decision from this fully educated, informed, consensual place to choose. And it's dangerous. And so that's when you see people kind of going in this very rocky deconstruction experience that they are moving away from something, but what they're moving away from is they've been controlled, and they don't like that anymore.
And you hit it on the nail. And I think even individuals are experiencing a lot of shame, especially around sexuality, and be able to, I mean, we see this, we chatted about this in the past. You know, you have someone who has a condition like vaginismus, right, who gets married, and you know, maybe the couple waited till they got married, and it's like they're finally getting an opportunity to be intimate, and it can't happen, can't handle penetration. There's pain associated with penetration, so there's that physical nature that, you know, folks like me take care of. And then on the other side, I'm sending them to you because I'm like, we need to unpack where that's coming from. And I think it's always surprising to me, or it's more surprising to me, just how much, once they hear that a lot of the work has to be done mentally, just how much they really want to either figure out a way around that.
Oh yeah, people love avoid counseling.
Oh yeah. Like, okay, what else could we do? Or do you have any other tools that I can use? Or is there something else that
other
we can
option
try?
but talking
but
to
it's
that
just
lady.
like, why would I? Because it's like, I think so many people are afraid of deconstructing their faith when we're not deconstructing your faith. We're likely deconstructing your religion and your doctrines. And that can be scary, because that's a safety net for a lot of people. Like, if you grew up and you were in a pretty close-knit, you know, church community, and you guys dressed similarly, you had similar interests, it's so safe.
It's a sense of belonging that you're afraid you're gonna lose.
So it's like almost as if like they're betraying their community by going out and saying, okay, I need to figure out better ways. And it's like conversation I have sometimes with, young women who are struggling with just being able to like accept physical changes or physical realities about themselves. It's just like, I don't know, I'm not really sure. Or, my favorite is, a lot of the work we do sometimes whenever we're dealing with anorgasmia. So that's a condition whenever you don't experience orgasm, right? Is sometimes we talk about accessing different types of pleasure. And so, non-sexual pleasure. And so it's because I want to get your brain happy again and used to pleasure. And so
that can be
hard
for some women. It's terrifying for some women because we've been told that pleasure is a problem.
Yeah, like, oh, you don't want to, like you must deny your flesh and you must do this. But have you read Song of Solomon? Like that's when all else fails, I refer to that chapter.
Yeah. So a couple things. I want to touch on this because I think this is really important for people to know. And then I'm going to come back to that. So don't let me forget it.
I won't.
I don't think most people realize. So I don't have a problem with purity, right? The word purity, I think it's a beautiful word. I have huge issues with the purity movement.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Right? I think the deconstruction movement is a little rocky right now, so I know why some people have concerns, but deconstruction in and of itself is actually a natural part of learning, identity development, and faith development. And if people understood, all deconstruction means is you're kind of leaving groupthink, which developmentally as a kid, you get given information, you take it on as your own, you try it on. But at some point, this idea of when your faith becomes your own actually can't happen until you leave groupthink, ask critical questions, deconstruct, and then make it your own. So actually, I would say we want everyone to deconstruct.
So good.
For the purpose of faith. And the deconstruction movement, like some of those voices I can get, like I get that some of that's not always helpful. So I just want to invite everybody to kind of reconsider like how we get charged about some words, because deconstruction is actually part of the learning process. Like
period.
The developmental learning process. Okay, let me come back to Songs of Solomon. So a lot of people ask me, like, how do we help sex in the church? And I would tell you that I think the church is very sexually fragile. Wow. And so when we think about how, like, the word fragility is used to, like, call out lots of systemic oppression and parties of privilege and power, I think the church is sexually fragile, right? Because they cannot handle really engaging sexuality, and they have treated it as dangerous, right? So like they don't want to get stronger, they don't want to get better. And one of the ways that shows up is, like, let's just theoretically play with an idea. If we could just get a whole generation and like incubate them, right? And we did not talk about beauty as dangerous. We did not talk about sexuality as a faux pas. We're not scared of arousal. We're not afraid of what naturally happens in the body that we have absolutely no control of, that actually don't mean lust, okay? And we develop a higher level capacity to engage our sexuality early on, so we are stronger and we're having lots of open dialogue. So, all these couples that you've kind of hypothetically mentioned come into my office and they're like, why did we not talk about this earlier? And I'm like, because you're all fragile and you act like you're going to just totally lose your faith or lose control of your personal discipline if we talk about sex. How cool would it be if we talked about it all the time?
Yeah.
And it wasn't scary, and it didn't mean I was going to lust, and I have total self-discipline over where my mind goes. But we're just open. Like, you and I can openly dialogue about all sorts of sexually explicit things because it's professional for us.
Yeah.
And even when I'm sitting with personal friends and they have like a one-off question, it's like I have total control over that being a very differentiated. I'm not going into
my mind's not going into the gutter.
No.
Exactly.
No.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. And what if we all got to develop that?
Oh, I think that's what it would say is that you're dealing with, and I think even just people who are parents watching this can really glean from this too, is how do you cultivate an environment where there's sexual resiliency? Where people can dialogue healthy, and there is, again, whenever, because I will be honest, a lot of us were raised to be fearful of sex, fearful
100%.
of sexual. And so that's why I come from the generation as a millennial where there was a huge teenage pregnancy crisis during my time, right? Everyone knew somebody who got knocked up, and it was like, that's what you don't want to be. And so because of that, you can't talk about it, you can't think about it. If they find out that you were writing love notes to a boy, you're getting accused, you're getting talked to by the youth pastor or something. It just created all this fear and tension around it. And I'm not saying that certain boundaries are not appropriate, especially for teenagers who are horny and want to be on top of each other. But I just think that there's a lot of concern there, right?
Well, my colleague and I, we get called to talk to the teenagers about sex.
Do you really? Oh, gosh.
Oh, yes. Like, hey, will you come and talk to our youth group? And I'm like, no, but I'll talk to your parents.
Exactly.
And I do. And I say, and don't just give me the youth parents. Give me everyone. And they're like, really? I'm like, yeah, because sex ed starts at birth. Yeah. So... And then we teach parents about developmental sex. What's interesting about that is by the time, and this is true about so many developmental models, by the time they reach adolescence, you are a guide. They are learning decision making. Ooh. If you have kept all the information from them, you have tied both hands behind their back.
Yep.
And you wonder why this is happening. The information, the education... is not scandalous. It is not, and the parents will sit there and go, wait a minute, I don't want to expose my kids. I'm like, you do.
You do.
You do.
And you want
to
be the way that that's managed, because somebody else, they're going to get exposed anyway.
Yes.
So why not that be in the construct of what you know that you can manage in the conversations, and they can ask questions, and it doesn't have to be this thing where they're suddenly, on the playground and a joke comes up and everybody's laughing except for them, and they just realize, oh, I'm out of the loop. I don't know what that means, right?
Yes, because I tell parents all the time, you're in a race with the world when it comes to sex education, and you do not get to determine the terms of the timeline. Well, really. It's funny. A while back, I think I might have been in my 20s at the time. But I remember having a conversation with my dad because Texas was thinking about raising the age of the driver's license from 16 to 18. Okay. Do you remember that? For a hot minute, they were thinking about raising the age. Yep. And I thought, oh, well, like at first blush, like it's kind of like, oh, yeah, well, we have a bunch of kiddos like having Rex. Like that sounds kind of reasonable. And my dad said something really brilliant. He said, absolutely not. And I was like, okay, tell me your logic. And he's like, I want them learning under my roof, not when they're going off to college. Like, he's like, it's a terrible idea. And I've held on to that as I've become a sex educator, because I'm like, guys, I'm not saying like, let's hope they have sex. Everybody kind of draws the line in different places. But you do want them to be educated while they're under your roof, while they're under your care. And honestly, it is a really false sense of control. If you think that you're controlling a teenager's sex life, they need to be equipped, including having this way of letting their values drive their choices without denying their sexuality. That's what they need to be practicing. And that means they need all the info.
That's spot on. And I love that we're having this conversation, because I think, one, it validates a lot of just the experiences that maybe we're experiencing as adults, and how we can really make sure that we're course correcting for a whole generation of people who just want to learn and who need to learn, right? And get exposed to this on time. All right. I wanted to wrap up with just this portion here, because I think we do have to talk about, and I think I kind of want to preface this with the person I think of. I've seen this type of person many times in my practice. And I was also fortunate enough to be doing this work pre-marriage. I married as a virgin, and I think had I not been a pelvic floor therapist virgin, I wouldn't have probably had a lot of fear and trepidation, but I felt very confident, right? But I'll say this. You've got the girl who may or may not have had a lot of sexual experiences, who places a lot of emphasis and importance around marital pleasure and marital sex. Like, she's pent up, waiting for everything to just align. And like, once we get married, I'm honoring God with my body. I've done everything right by the book. We've done the premarital counseling. We've abstained. And now we get to be married. And it's like, I'm ready to be there. We're there, and I can't my body is stiff. My body doesn't want to handle penetration. My body's locked off to this, right? And then you've got this young man who has been faithful, who has been well counseled and well mentored, who did right by her, who honored her body, and who made sure that he waited, and he's excited, and the members of his body are ready to go. But then he's also kind of afraid to just go for it because he's like, I'm not really sure if I'm allowed to, right? So there's all this inner dialogue that the individual, both of them are having, that I've learned that their bodies are then communicating to one another, right?
Yes.
So let's talk about what does this mean? How is this happening? What are these conversations that are creating so many signals to our bodies to not want sex?
Yeah, so all of those historical messages are talking in your body. Might be a good way of thinking about it. Like they have voices, right? And we might be aware of them, we might not be aware of them.
Yeah.
A lot of our subconscious or the things that are at play outside of our awareness are still very strong communicators to our bodies and also our partners and spouses' bodies. And so I think, one, that's part of why it's so confusing when it doesn't work, is because a lot of times, sometimes people have stuff in their awareness, right? Like they have access to like, I feel nervous, this is what's coming up for me. Some people do. For those who don't, just know you have a lot of background at play. And what happens between two people, one of my favorite parts of talking about kind of the nervous system, if you will, is really thankful for all the work that Stephen Porges did with polyvagal theory. But one of the parts of the nervous system is neuroception, and neuroception is how we are perceiving, and it is with like micro expressions, and we are not thinking about it. I always tell people, I'm like teaching clients and they're like, okay, so when? I'm like, no. What you don't understand is you cannot do this on purpose. Like it is happening at 100 miles an hour in automatic parts of our body.
Involuntarily.
It is not something that you do intentionally. It's happening, and it's really meant to be a protective part of the nervous system that keeps you safe. So neuroception is always trying to read safety and danger cues. And one of the interesting things about safety and danger cues is a lot of people hear those words and they feel like really big, right? Like I feel safe or I don't feel safe, or I'm in danger, I'm not in danger. And we think only in terms of life-threatening, and that is not the case. And so when we think about danger cues, the polyvagal camp would say that danger cues show up anytime it's from dislike, just dislike, to life-threatening. Right? There's a whole spectrum of danger cues. And so you react like you're in danger anywhere in that spectrum, and you're reading that off people and you're giving that off, right?
It's all the same.
Yeah, and safety cues are anywhere from neutral to like just think of the best things ever, right? And so when I say she doesn't feel safe, it can be anywhere from dislike to life-threatening. Okay? And those cues are there to put your body, start moving them into different systems of defense and protection, and to help you make good decisions. Your brain and body's defense systems are designed to keep you alive and to thrive, okay? So all that starts moving. So if you're getting ready to be intimate and have sex with someone that, like, hey, it's gone well, like you guys made this choice, it's like, let's say it's an ideal situation, but someone gets nervous or something gets triggered and it's out of your awareness, or like you kind of read them and like all that reading is going back and forth and you're scanning, and all of a sudden everybody's like this. But what we're really talking about, yes, some sex education would be amazing. I'm all for that. But what we're really talking about is we need to be educated on emotional intelligence and like the nervous system and the body going into these situations. Because that couple could have been like, hey, I feel a little bit braced and nervous right now. Like, can we do something to like just attend to our bodies for a second? Sometimes it's not a sex issue. It turns into a sex issue.
It could be a body awareness, is a body image issue, self-esteem,
it could be
all sorts of
anything.
things.
Because, and I know you know this because of your expertise, but we all know that sexual issues are biological, psychological, social, relational, actual sexual process and then spiritual. And when I do good sex therapy, I'm looking at all those things.
Yeah.
So in any given moment, all those components can interrupt a sexual process or be a player.
Wow.
And that neuroception, so like all of a sudden your partner kind of like does something, and again, you're not thinking about it, but your body is responding, and all of a sudden you guys are feeding off of each other, and it's like downward spiraling instead of upward spiraling. So there's a lot at play.
And I just want to, like, for folks that are listening, what she's really saying is a paper cut and somebody with a gun in your head is the same level of...
You'll pull back.
You will pull back in the same way, right? And it's like your body can attend to that almost in the same level of severity. So if you see a nasty message online versus if somebody is raising their voice to you, it could feel the same, right, in your body.
Well, it's going to move you into defenses. Now, it might be at different severity levels,
yeah,
but it's still going to move you away from the part of our body, which you and I love, which is that ventral vagal, part that helps us rest, digest, calm, and connect. And so it's hard for us to get there when we're in the danger cues. Here is one of the things that I always want to mention that I think is really important when we talk about that. So I'm a little bit infamous for, I'm not the originator of this phrase, but I do put it into the ether, and I do mean it a little bit more broadly than I think the original person said. Women who struggle with wanting sex, it is not that they don't want sex most of the time, in my opinion. It's that they don't like the sex they're being offered. Ooh. Now back it up into polyvagal theory, dislike to danger.
Okay.
They don't like the sex they're being offered. That means in their own bodies, like what they've been raised to believe about themselves.
Yes.
Maybe it's what the partner's offering.
Yes.
And sometimes it's culturally what you're offering me as a woman. I am not interested.
That is it. Like spot on. That is spot on.
And so sex is dangerous, and I can't get into the parasympathetic part of my nervous system to get relaxed and aroused, right? Because I got to get in that side, because arousal and vasocongestion happens when I'm relaxed. And so we think about sexual dysfunction. There is a big global issue, not just partnered issue, with the sex I'm being offered.
Yes. Ooh, and that is so good.
And it makes sense if you understand how the nervous system works. So yes, I wish we were just less fragile mental health, sexuality, trauma-wise in the church, because then we could engage these things. We would have tools to kind of work through these things. Instead, people have to come and see you and I and do so much unlearning and then so much on-ramping of new information. And they do. It feels like it's this long journey and it's hard. It is worth it.
Absolutely.
It is worth it.
Absolutely.
But it is a lot, because we're not being given these tools developmentally, and we could have been, in my opinion. We could have been.
And I think too that one thing that excites me, because I always, really see the silver lining, is I do think that part of the joy of having a well-informed generation is access to information, right?
Yes.
People are curious, people are excited, people are willing to say that however it was being done is not how I want it to be done. And I think that's going to open a lot of doors to just a much better, and I think the conversations we're going to be having around sex and in the church and trauma is going to look very different 20, 30 years from now, because I think we would have evolved, hopefully, and we might be tackling other problems, more specifically. So this was a great conversation, Dr. Jenna. I am so grateful for another sister in the Lord, who gets it. You can't have this kind of conversation with everybody.
I need so many teammates. Like, there's just so much work to be done. Lots of teammates.
Like, there's so much that you can't even talk to people about. But nonetheless, I hope you learned something to the audience that's listening, and I hope that you feel validated in your experiences, and I hope that you are equipped with languages, and I think that's really what's important here is language is so freeing and can be a really good start point. And I think, finding a sex therapist is a great way to really unlock personal healing, but also just being able to really start to date yourself and give yourself the opportunity to rediscover, not group think, but be able to unlearn. So anyway, any last words for us today, Dr. Jenna, before we let you go?
I just I hope your listeners feel inspired and hopeful. One of the fun things about my world is we like to say that we're hope dealers. And I know I'm not the originator of that word either, that phrase, but I really do. We do have to borrow other people's hope when we feel lost and discouraged. And I really do want them to feel hopeful.
Yeah.
That there are, and you do need a team, but like there are teams of professionals who are on your side, and there are answers. And if you find a good one, we will help you hunt down your options, and there is hope.
Absolutely. Well, that is Dr. Jenna, ladies and gentlemen. I'm so excited to have you. Make sure I'll definitely put all of her social media stuff in the description box so that you guys can give her a follow. She's hilarious to follow, always posts really great things. But take care. All right.